Je pense que it's okay for everybody.
Yes, we are you.
Okay. I'm very pleased to introduce this second Phy2SUDOE workshop hosted this time in Charente. Even so, it's a virtual meeting. When Mr. Mensch contacted the department to work on this scientific program, we saw an opportunity to test a new process responding to the wish of the population of a sustainable approach and consistent with our political commitment. Thanks to our European partners, particularly INRAE Bogeco, the brownfield site located in the Jules Durando Street will be a 200 square meters testing ground for a phyto management experimentation. This experiment, among others, will be introduced by Mr. Mensch and Mrs. Abré. C'est pour moi l'occasion d'exprimer la reconnaissance du département à l'ensemble de nos partenaires européens pour leur accompagnement scientifique, HPC Environnement pour leur accompagnement à Syracuse aux États-Unis. Je vais donc laisser la parole à Monsieur Carbizu sans attendre pour nous présenter donc le programme Phy2SUDOE auquel le département est extrêmement heureux de pouvoir participer. Donc, I wish you an inspiring workshop and hope to meet you soon in Charente. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Vergès. Carlos, if you are agree, I give you the speak.
Okay, let me try first to see if I can share my presentation. Hold on a sec. Can you see my presentation?
No.
No? No. Hold on a sec.
No.
Hold on a sec. Hold on a sec.
It's okay.
How about now? Now?
It's okay. No, it's okay.
Okay. So I can start now, yeah? I'm going to... Hold on a sec. Is it okay now, Barbara? Yeah?
Yes, it's okay. We see your presentation.
Thank you so much. So, hello everybody. Welcome to the second Phy2SUDOE workshop. My name is Carlos, and I'm going to very, very briefly present the Phy2SUDOE project, which, as you all know, deals with the phytomanagement of contaminated sites in the SUDOE space. This Phy2SUDOE project is a continuation of the first Phy2SUDOE project, in which a network of phytomanagement sites was created in the SUDOE space. In this second project, we aim to consolidate the network of sites under phytomanagement that was already established in the first project. Of course, we also we are expanding the network of sites with new types of contamination and new innovative phytomanagement strategies. In fact, in the first project, we were mainly focused on sites contaminated with trace elements, and we are now more focused in mixed contaminated sites. And finally, we want to collaborate in the conservation of biodiversity by means of protecting endemic biodiversity in contaminated sites and also by means of promoting biodiversity thanks to the implementation of different phytomanagement strategies. These objectives are reflected in the different work packages. As you can see here, the first work package deals with the long-term maintenance of the network of sites already established in the first project. The second is related to the expansion of this network, incorporating new sites, new phytomanagement options under a variety of soil and climate conditions in the SUDOE space. And finally, the third work package deals with the identification and conservation of the endemic biodiversity in many contaminated sites for different reasons, including possible biotechnological applications. Okay, in this slide, you can see in the right part of the slide, you can see the 10 partners of the consortium. We have some partners from France, 2 partners from Portugal, and 5 partners from Spain, as well as a consulting company called DEX that is helping us with the administration issues. All of them together, we have expertise on the chemical, toxicological, and ecological aspects of the remediation field. We have expertise on bioremediation, phytoremediation, phytomanagement, and also we have expertise in the determination and evaluation for a great variety of soil physicochemical parameters and also biological parameters, including plants, microbes, and soil invertebrates. Apart from the 10 partners that were included in the previous slide, here you can see a list of the 15 associated partners included in the project. They are also located in Spain, France, and Portugal, and we sincerely thank them for their participation in the project. I certainly encourage you to have a look to our website, to our webpage. Over there you can find a lot of information on the project, on the phytomanagement field in general, and also specifically on the 15 sites that we are doing studies at the moment. 7 of those sites were already established in the previous Phy2SUDOE project, and then in this second project we have included 8 new sites. So right now we are working in 15 different sites subjected to phytomanagement. As you can see here in this slide, some of them are contaminated with trace elements, some of them are contaminated with organics. We have mining areas, we have peri-urban sites, we have brownfields. So as you can see, we have a great variety of situations. And then you can find all this information, the description of the sites, and the different works being performed in each of them in our webpage. But I wanted to emphasize the let's say the philosophy of the project. You know, the philosophy when we are dealing with remediation projects. You know, the main objective for us when we are doing any remediation or phytomanagement is not only to decrease the concentration of the contaminants, either total or bioavailable concentrations. We want to restore soil health. Soil health defined as the capacity of a given soil to perform a great variety of functions and to provide ecosystem services. So it's not only dealing with the contaminants, but also to make the most of that possibility of the remediation technique and strategy to increase soil functions and provide ecosystem services. And in this respect, to this purpose, biological methods of remediation are better compared to traditional physicochemical methods of soil remediation, because in a way they work with nature, not against it. Just very briefly to emphasize the difference between phytoremediation there are many projects on phytoremediation and phytomanagement, which is the strategy that we use here in Phy2SUDOE. In the case of phytoremediation, we pay attention to the reduction in contaminant concentrations, either total or bioavailable concentrations. When we are dealing with phytoremediation, we are concerned about pollution control, reducing contaminant linkages. But when we are talking about phytomanagement, like is the case of this project, phytomanagement is a nature-based solution that it is also concerned with pollution control, but at the same time, we want to make the most of that strategy to obtain different products, and in that way we can get an economic revenue. And also we are very interested in promoting the provision of ecosystem services. Phytomanagement is a more holistic approach. It's not only about controlling pollution, it's also about the possibility of obtaining products, in that way economic revenue, and also to optimize the provision of ecosystem services under the phytomanagement strategy. But if we analyze things, at a higher level of analysis, at a higher level of interpretation, the main telos and ethos of Phy2SUDOE is to contribute to the fight against the degradation of our planet. We all know about this degradation. We all know about the problems with the contamination. We have a huge problem of global contamination, climate change, invasive species, the destruction of habitats, like, for example, the soil ecosystem, loss of biodiversity. And phytomanagement can contribute against the fight, can contribute to the fight against all these problems, contamination, climate change, the loss of biodiversity. In other words, phytomanagement can contribute to the fight against a potential irreversible descent into the Anthropocene and the Eremocene. I always like to finish my presentations with a quote, and since we are talking here about obtaining products and ecosystem services so that we can get an economic revenue while facing pollution control, I have selected this quote by the great biologist, recently deceased, Edward Wilson, which I'm going to read now. The living world is in desperate condition. It is suffering steep declines in all the levels of its diversity. It will be helped, but not saved, by economic measures of its ecological services and potential products. Only a major shift in moral reasoning, with greater commitment given to the rest of life, can meet this greatest challenge of the century. So what I wanted to emphasize is that it's not only about controlling pollution, about obtaining products, about the provision of ecosystem services. It's also about a greater commitment given to the rest of life. And this project and phytomanagement in general, I think, can contribute to the fight against the degradation of our planet. And nothing else. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope I have done it in 10 minutes. And see if I can manage now to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Mr. Karabuchi. If you are any question, you can use the chat or you can raise the hand icon. If not, we welcome Ángeles Trito Fernandez from Institute of Agrobiological, sorry for my accent, Research of Galicia. And after Michel Mensch from INRAE of Bordeaux and Elena Gomez Moreira from Catholic University of Porto to present us the Phy2SUDOE results.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. So, as I'm then trying to also share my screen.
It's okay, Andreas?
I'm trying.
Okay.
But I think for some reason it's asking me what I want to share, and if I say all the screen, but the link for sharing is not active. I just can cancel.
Okay.
So I send my presentation.
Yes. I think Nicola.
Last time I remember I had the same problem for sharing.
No problem, Andres. If you want, Nicola, share screen for your presentation. It's okay?
Yes, please, because for some reason it doesn't work from here.
Yes.
Yeah,
Do you see the presentation?
Sorry, this is the Word Package 3, and my presentation is Word Package 1.
C'est l'autre. C'est le numéro. Tu l'as reçu, André?
W-E-1.
Sorry, Andres, we checked.
It's okay.
Ángeles.
Yes.
Sorry.
Have you entered the platform as a presenter or as a guest?
I just follow the link as a presenter. Otherwise, I couldn't talk to you. I think because Bea and Carmela are just next to me, and they just can listen.
So I was thinking it was a problem maybe with the difference between being a presenter or a guest, but
because I press, there is a blue button here, share screen, and then I can press this button, but then I do not have option to open my desktop or my screen. I just
now we can see you. Now we can see it, Angelis. Now we can see it.
Okay.
It's okay? You can see?
Yes, it's okay now. You just can please pass the next slide. Well, my presentation is about the Word Package 1, which is the main objective or is dedicated to the maintenance of the network of sites that we have established during the first Phy2SUDOE project. And then we intend to monitoring the benefits of these, the long-term benefits of this Python management. The specific objectives are to assess the performance of the solutions we implemented there, to detect and correct, if necessary, the contamination. There are problems of contamination control. And finally, the long-term maintenance of these phyto-managed areas. For this, we will have to implement protocols, the adequate protocols for the different sites, and also to design the adequate tools to do this work and to monitor the sites. The next slide, please. This is the table showing all the sites that we established in Phy2SUDOE and that we keep working on them. There are sites with combined contamination with organic and inorganic contaminants, and also some others with just trace element. As you see, We have sites in France, 2 sites in France, 1 site in Portugal, and 4 sites in Spain, 2 in the Basque Country and 2 in the northwest in Galicia. And as I said, there are organic and inorganic contaminants, and in some places, like in Portugal, mainly tungsten and copper and lead, or in Galicia with just copper or cadmium and lead, the main contaminants. So the next slide, please. Regarding the first site in France, this site is, the soil has been amended with dolomite and organic matter applied once or in 2 occasions. And the main activities carried out until now was the sowing of winter barley and weeding. The team in France has also harvested the miscanthus and is currently harvesting the amorpha plants. And they are also working by grinding and analyzing the barley samples collected in 2021. This site is dedicated to the plant species are high yielding crops. The next slide, please. In France, the second place is dedicated also to herbaceous vegetation, to different grasses, and the team is monitoring the plots and preparing the samples taken in 2021, the shoots that they harvested. In this site, the soil has been amended with biochar, compost, and they are also trying selenium and silicium fertilization, foliar fertilization. The next slide, please. The next steps foreseen for this team are the harvest. Part in the case of amorpha is being carried out nowadays, and then the harvest of vetiver is foreseen for the end of February. Also, they plan to apply the silicium and selenium fertilizers on the winter barley already soon. And there are also some soil sampling of the miscanthus, vetiver, and poplar plots. These are mainly for the meta-analysis that the team in the Basque Country is going to carry out for the analysis of the bacterial, fungal, and fauna biodiversity. In the case of the site 2, there is also some soil sampling plan for March. And the application, as I said, the application of the fertilizers, the next cut is foreseen for June 22. And of course, the analysis of all the shoot samples that will be taken. The next slide, please. In the case of Borraya, the Portuguese team has monitored the site and analyzed the survival, and they have also taken plant and soil samples that are being analyzed. I think they expect to have soon results from the samples taken in the last months. And then the next slide, please. In the case of the sites in the Basque Country, the sites S5B and S5A and S6, they have been reforested with willow and poplar plants that have been inoculated. They plan to monitor these replanted plots, and also in one of the sites, the main activities will be plant analysis that will be carried out by the Basque Country University, and soil analysis, mainly of genes related to the biodiversity of bacteria, fungi, and soil fauna. The soil quality will be monitored following a strategy based on soil cards. And the next slide, please. In the case of the sites in Galicia, we have the Pedrafita site with cadmium and lead contamination. We have been there. The last time we have been there was in October 21. We have analyzed the survival of the vegetation there. In general, the plots are in good condition. We have also measured the chlorophyll in leaves, and we have taken plant and soil samples. In some of the plots, the next slide, please. In the next slide, please. This is a scheme of the site in Pedrafita. We have a big plot on the right side, which has been amended with compost, and there we have plots with Salis smithiana and also an intercropping of Salis smithiana with Alnus. And then there is another area on the left divided in 2 blocks where we also test NPK fertilization. In this case, we didn't apply compost, and we test NPK fertilization and intercropping. And the central part is dedicated to testing different bacterial inocula. In the case of these plots, we have measured the growth of the trees, and we could detect certain influence of the inocula, and we plan to re-inoculate again these plots in the next spring. In general, the survival is about 50% in the case of the plots non-amended or compost amended, and the fertilization or the intercropping didn't have a big effect on the survival. The next slide, please. Yeah, in this graph, you see the tree height of different trees inoculated with bacterial inocula. As you can see, with some inocula, we have a positive effect of the plant growth promoting bacteria, and we plan to keep working with these isolates to improve the vegetation in this contaminated site. And can you go back to the slide before, please? On the right side, there is a table with all the parameters that we are measuring to monitor the site. There are soil-related parameters like physicochemical, different trace element variables, and also microbiological and biochemical parameters. And we also measure the nutrient status and the trace element concentration in the vegetation growing in this site. So in the next slide, and this is the second site in Galicia. Is a site contaminated with copper. In general, we analyze the plots, and in general, they are in good condition. They are the trees that survive, growing well, and they are healthy. We have also taken soil samples and plant samples, and we have measured the chlorophyll of the leaves of the trees there. And then for the plots that were planted in 2017, the soil and plant sampling is foreseen for spring 22. The next slide, please. In this Touro site, we have 3 blocks amended with compost and 2 different technosols. And in green, you can see the plots dedicated to the cultivation of agrostis with apoaceae. And then in blue, the plots that are dedicated to the growth of salix. And you can see there also the plots with populus planted in 2017 that, as I said, will be analyzed in the spring this year. And on the right side, again, there's a list of all the parameters we are following, or several physicochemical soil properties and biochemical and microbiological properties, as well as, of course, the trace element contamination and the plant nutrient content and trace element content in the above gram biomass. The next slide, please. In this Touro site, we are also monitoring these columns that were packed with different soils treated in different ways during the first Phy2SUDOE project. And periodically, we are analyzing the pore water and the drainage water to see if the quality of this water to make an additional control of contamination. The next slide, please. And I think this is all what I very briefly wanted to tell about the activities that we have been doing in Work Package 1. I don't know if our colleagues from France, Portugal, or the Basque Country want to add any additional information to what I told you now here. And of course, if you have questions, just let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreles. If you have a question, you can ask on the chat or raise a hand. Okay. If not, Mr. Mensch, I give you the time to present us a phyto management option under a variety of soil and climate conditions.
Good afternoon, Barbara. Good afternoon, everybody. Buenas tardes. I try to share my screen now. Can you see it?
Not yet.
No. J'ai l'écran.
If you have a problem, we can do.
I send you my presentation.
Yes, we have. My colleague can share our screen if you want.
Yeah, because I think it doesn't work.
Okay.
I don't know why.
We make. It's okay.
It's okay? Because I only see cancel. Yes, this is one. This is this one.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so I can start. Next slide, please. The GT2, it is exactly the same objective than the GT1, except that we are working on new sites that were joining the network about 2 years ago. The first one is in France. It is Durando. It is a former site where batteries were produced. We were working with the Charente County on this site, and also especially, and also our colleague in Santiago de Compostela. The purpose was to prepare the filtriol and the lysimeter there. So we were managing pot experiments previously, and even if the soil is contaminated, you can see we have a pH of 9. One of the major concerns is zinc, and we have some spots with copper, nickel, mercury. But if you look about the phytotoxicity of the soil, is very low. You have some slides showing you different plant species like alfalfa, black poplar, tobacco, grasses like agrostis, and we compare the Durando site and the control site, and you can see we have, because due to the low fertility, we have a lower growth of the plant, but we don't have any visible symptom of phytotoxicity. So what we are preparing at the moment is shoot analysis of the plant harvest in the pot experiment, but we are mainly focusing now on the implementation of the filtriol. Next slide. Just a word about the hyperaccumulator. We are doing it with our colleague in Santiago. We're managing it, but for the moment, due to the pH very high, we have a lot of carbonates. such hyperaccumulator of nickel were not developing. It's the work of Beatrice and Angeles especially. About Les Avinières, it's also another site in France. It's a former mining area. Next slide, and it is managed by Fertilinov Environnement, Phy2SUDOE. Next slide. We have different field trials there, and in the past meeting, Suir was presenting especially the result of the phytostabilization, and you can see the development of the vegetation cover. Okay, now what is going on this site? It is in fact she focused on the microbial community and especially the fungi, and what she's doing it's doing a profile using PCR box about the microbial community, and she tried to trap some mycorrhizae, especially Doricinium rosobia, and the sequencing is in progress. Next slide. Sentine, it's another French site. It's totally different. It's a mining area, but in the mountain, in the Pyrenees. We work especially with Bordeaux INP, and of course INRAE. What has been done after the characterization of the site? It is a pot experiment that is going on at the moment. And especially, you see the Le Bocard is totally barren soil. It's at the bottom of the site, and there is no vegetation developing at this area. So the main problem is the dispersion, the wind erosion and water erosion. And we are waiting for the soil analysis, but we know that we have zinc and cadmium in this soil. And I've started to apply some compost at the 5% rate according to previous experiment in this soil. And you can see that immediately, even the tomato that were the tomato seed included in the compost were already germinated. And I have great wishes that we can establish other plant species and especially grasses on this soil just by adding some compost. Next slide. It is a board site. Remember that during the summer, the previous summer in 2021, we were collecting soil and shoots of the plant covering the site. It's a former landfill with different metal and metalloid and organic contaminants, so it's a mixed pollution. At the moment, what is running, it is a pot experiment where we will test the phytotoxicity of the soil after 1 year of phytomanagement. The site is phytomanaged with a mixed culture, a mixed stand of white clover and grasses, especially ryegrass. It's a work with Pyrénées-Atlantic County, and also Suez Environnement was contributing to this site and the phytomanagement of this site. Some information: we got very big flooded in this area, and by chance, the design and the field experiment were not destroyed during winter time during these flooding events. Next slide. It is a site in Galicia managed by Beatrice and Angeles and Carmela Monteroso. It's a former abandoned berg serpentine quarry, where the purpose is to implement nickel phytomining. The plots were designed, and at the moment they are testing 3 amendments: municipal solid waste compost, grape bagasse, apple bagasse, and the plants that are planted are Born Murelia emarginata, and the other one is Born Murelia tymphea, at a density of 4 plants per square meter, and they have implemented an irrigation system. For the moment, what they notice, it is a high survival of the compost among high survival of the plant in the compost among the plot. The survival is a little bit lower in the apple bagasse and grape bagasse plot, so the compost has an advantage compared to the other organic matter. Next slide. It's the design of the experiment, and what they are showing us, it is that the new plant were germinated in the greenhouse and they were transplanted into the plot amended with compost. Temp density was used, and you have in fact the data showing you the survival and also the plants that were implemented again to replace those were died during the winter time. Of course, they are practicing all the maintenance and especially weeding of the plot during this winter time and next spring. Next slide. Okay, that's the next step about the site. They are preparing new seedling of hyperaccumulator of nickel. They want to test in early spring Noca cerulescens. It's another hyperaccumulator, but much more known for zinc and cadmium accumulation. But some population are also able to hyperaccumulate some part of nickel. They will test different approach, different strategy, transplantation of seedling or direct sowing of the seed. To harvest that's another objective is to harvest the already established plant in spring and to monitor the root sprouting. The last thing will be to continue, of course, the maintenance of the plot, especially weed control. Next slide. The next slide, we are moving to another site in Spain, in the Basque County. It is the Guernica site, managed especially by Manu Soto from Bilbao, in collaboration with Chema Becerril and all the friends in Necker, also in Bilbao. It's in fact a landfill where sewage sludge were dumped for a very long time. So we have a mixture of metal, metalloid, and organic contaminants. So again, it's a mixed contamination. And at this site, they are testing different strategy. You have a small thing showing the interconnection and potential interaction between the microorganism, the plant, and the earthworm. And the purpose is to test the effect of the earthworm, bacteria, plant alone, or if you are mixing the different approach, and especially if you have the full combination where you are implementing the use of plant, bacteria, and earthworm for an active remediation. Or they are testing, they have different tools and especially a battery of ecotoxicity tests. And also they are comparing this battery of ecotoxicity with chemical analysis. And for the moment, for the decrease in exposure to the contaminant, what they are, their data, it is that the plant and earthworm, or the combination of bacteria and earthworm, or plant, bacteria, and earthworm, shows the best result to decrease the exposure. So in any case, the implementation of earthworm into the strategy give an advantage. Of course, if you have plant and bacteria, it's better than if you have only earthworm. And apparently the full combination is also one very good strategy. What is ongoing, it is to continue the toxicity bioassay, and of course to develop the large-scale application for the most efficient treatment. Probably all this treatment will include the earthworm. That could be interesting to test it after that in other sites, for example, board or other, where we have such mixed contamination. Next slide. Next slide. Yes, this is, we are in Vitoria-Gasteiz. It is the work of Juan Villela and a collaborator at the Centre for Ambiental Studies. It is the site of Sumabakotsa. You have, for those who are not familiar, on the Phy2SUDOE webpage, you have all the information about the different sites and especially the new site. What are they doing? It is in fact the phytomanagement and seeding. At the moment, they are monitoring the plots. These plots were with Gale oak forest, with Olm oak forest, or willow and poplar. So it's mainly trees. And what are they doing? It is the monitoring of the plant, of this plant, and also they are managing a plant and carrying out a plant analysis in the purpose also to establish a soil card analysis with Necker. The purpose it is to link the response or the answer of the plants and especially trees with the response of the microbial community. Especially, I think Lure Epelde should do that, especially for poplar in next April with different sites. Next slide. This is a view, especially of Necker and Lure managing the soil sampling at this site in Vitoria-Gasteiz. Next slide. We are finishing by Portugal, so we are going south and south, and this is a site with a mixed pollution in Esteronja. What they are doing, it is soil sampling. Now it's the chemical characterization of the site is done. As you see, we have a lot of metalloid and metals. And also a range of organics, including PAH, so polyaromatic hydrocarbon, and also BTEX. What they are doing at the moment, it is recording all the contamination in the site, and the purpose is to establish a geostatistical analysis and a geostatistical map of this site. Regarding the exposure, one of the purposes is to trap the mesofauna and especially the insect. So they have implemented pitfall traps in the study area and in the reference area, and they are capturing the mesofauna or the insect living at the surface of the soil. Next slide. And what they are doing also is to focus about the microbial community, and especially they are using the bed lamina. The bed lamina, it's a test where you have different substrate and you can see which substrate is degraded by the soil organism. So at the moment they are recording the information coming from this test. It's an in situ test. The next step will be the phytoremediation planning according to the analytical characterization of the site, deployment of the best option for the phytomanagement. They will interpret all the data from the bed lamina and, of course, process with the macrofauna and especially identification, which is, I know myself, it's not always so obvious to identify all the insect and macrofauna and mesofauna that we are collecting. Sometimes you need very, very specialists for going not only into the family and but really to go to the species and subspecies. You need a bit of expert to do that. So that's it for the GT2, and I give you the floor, Barbara. And if you have any question, I will be there to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Mensch. In 10 minutes, Elena Gomez-Moreira presents us conservation and endemic biodiversity in contaminated sites. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if I can share my screen. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, Elena, yes.
Okay, thank you. It's to share video or no, it's screen. Okay, let me check. Just a minute.
Thank you. We see. Not more. Elena, you hear me? I think you are connecting problem. No? Sorry, we have problem. Okay, sorry. I think we have a problem with the connection. If you agree, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you, Barbara. Yes, we hear you.
If you yes, if you agree, Mrs. Lamotte begin. The time Elena come soon. It's okay for you?
Yeah, perfectly. I think Elena is joining again. I'm not positive, but if not, we can proceed with the next presentation of Work Package 3. Yeah, perfectly.
Yes. I see the presentation of Elena, but I don't see Elena. Elena, do you hear me? Okay. Okay. Elena, do you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Okay, you can start. Yes.
Okay. You can see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. I don't know what happened, but I'm back again. Okay.
No problem. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm presenting the work package number 3, which is the identification and conservation of native biodiversity in contaminated sites for its potential exploitation and biotechnological applications. It's a big name. So it comprises 4 activities. The first one is the assessment of plant biodiversity. The second is the implementation of conservation measures for plant biodiversity. The third is the isolation and characterization of microbial strains that can have biotechnological potential. And the fourth is the assessment and conservation of microinvertebrate biodiversity. Specifically, and regarding the plant biodiversity, we want to identify the plant species in the contaminated sites, namely metallophytic or endemic plants that are really there in those sites. Identify the metal exclusion and accumulation strategies, evaluate the biomass. Can you see the slides passing through?
Yes, Elena, but can you move to the diaporama mode to enlarge the slide?
Yes, I'm in that mode. Can you see it? No.
Okay. No, it's not. We can see, but it is not the diaporama. It's
But
only.
in my screen it is.
Okay. So
And like
let's
this.
go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
I'm sorry. Like this, it's better? No.
Yeah. Yes, it's better.
Okay. I don't know what to do. So we want to evaluate the biomass, the ecology, and possible uses of plants identified, and then collect some soil data. Regarding the conservation measures, if we consider some plant of conservation interest, we want to implement some physical barriers and identify possible threats to the survival of those species, elaborate criteria for a possible declaration of these systems as metalliferous ecosystems, and then we want to preserve through germplasm and plant tissue banks those plants. Regarding the microbial strains, we will isolate cultivable bacterial strain, mycorrhizal fungi, and those strains of interest will be stored in a biobank. Native macroinvertebrates will also be collected and analyzed, and the samples will be processed for storage in a biobank. These will be done or are being conducted in 4 sites, 1 in Portugal, Borralha Mine, 2 in Spain, Bandeira in Galicia, Guernica, and in France, Santine, which is in a mining area that Michel already spoke about. Starting with Borralha Mine, the main sources of contamination are the tailings and the ponds exposed to climatic conditions. This is a former mine that was for tungsten production. The soil main contaminants are copper, arsine, cadmium, and lead, and arsenic as well. We did a survey, the plant survey, in 6 different sites across the mining area, polluted sites with high concentrations of metals and metalloids in the soil. And the sites were covered by trees, namely pines, oaks, willows. We have some invasive species like Robinia pseudoacacia. We have several types of shrubs and herbs like Agrostis capillaris, Digitalis purpurea, etc. And from the 80 species that we identified, 49 were reported with value for phytoremediation purposes. Some of the plants that are interesting are Agrostis capillaris for phytostabilization, Erica arborea as well. Phy2SUDOE can be used for phytostabilization depending on the metal we are talking about, or for phytoextraction, and the Phy2SUDOE multiflowers for phytostabilization. And these are common plants in the area.
Sorry, Elena.
Yes.
I think we see the same slides at the beginning. It's normal. Okay, it's better. We see another slide.
Okay,
Thank
it's
you.
not in the diaporama format now.
Okay, it's good. It's okay. Thank you.
Okay, so now this is the site that I told you about, the vegetation cover and the plants. Okay, you are seeing now? Okay.
We see.
Okay, so the next step, the seeds from the valuable species that we consider will be collected next spring for germ bank conservation, and the macroinvertebrate will also be sampled in next spring. The soil was also collected, and we cultured the soil, and a total of 65 different bacterial strains were obtained. And we see here 4 types of bacterial isolates. This for the identification and characterization of microbial strains with potential biotechnological. Then we are going to do some traits of the bacteria. We are going to do the phosphorus solubilization, the ACC deaminase activity, which is a stress enzyme. We're going to see if it produces siderophores, which are important to chelate the iron. We're going to see if it produces some phytohormones, such as indole acetic acid and ammonium. And these are important traits in nutrient acquisitions and growth promotions of the plants established and growing in these contaminated sites. We also do trap cultures to retrieve the fungi, namely the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, which are very important fungi that we can find in these areas and can inoculate in other plants that we want to restore. The arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi has also very, very good traits to promote the growth of plants and nutrient acquisition. It reduces the oxidative stress of the plants. It increases the water and nutrient absorption and also regulates the phytohormone synthesis. It also has beneficial traits for the soil. It increases the soil health and quality, it increases the moisture, and it increases the fertility levels. Regarding the French side, the Sainte-Anne-Bollard, it's a former mining area and smelting site. It has high concentrations of lead and zinc. We can see here an aerial view of the former mining area, and here the former mining activities and facilities in a scheme. It was conducted a survey of the plants in several sites of the mountain. So we had the Agrostis capillaris as one of the species that were collected, Armeria, which is the metallophyte, is a bioindicator of the pollutants, Putschinsia alpina, Phy2SUDOE, Minuartia verna, and Armeria muelleri, which are also metallophytes. And the metallophyte seeds will also be collected next summer. Regarding the microbial strains with biotechnological potential, 6 strains were isolated so far and are being characterized by NICAR. For the AMF, the trap cultures are already established in Universidade Católica in Oporto. The macroinvertebrate will also be sampled next. Regarding the Bandeira Quarry, which is located in Melide Serra do Carrião in Galicia, we have some areas that were surveyed for the plants around the active open cast quarry and in the quarry itself. And it was seen very interesting and very different kind of plants. We also saw Centaurea galicica, Nocaia caerulescens, Ericoscoparia, Lipidium heterophyllum, so several types of plants. We had also a tree layer, a scrub layer, and an herbaceous layer with different types of plants in that area around the quarry. In the quarry itself, it is a very arid zone with a sparse vegetation, and it was found Nocaia, caerulescens, Lepidium, heterophyllum, Silene, and Sagina merinoi. According to the analysis of the plants, 2 plants are considered plant species of conservation interest, which are the Nocaia caerulescens, which is a zinc hyperaccumulator and in some cases a cadmium hyperaccumulator. In Galicia, it has been seen as a nickel hyperaccumulator, and Silene uniflora that inland it only occurs in these substrates. Next steps will be to take seed samples to contribute to building up the germplasm bank, carry out a new survey, and identify possible in situ and ex situ conservation measures for the species that are and will be with conservation interests. Regarding microbial strains, they are ongoing, the characterization of cultivable bacterial strains, and regarding the macroinvertebrate biodiversity, it also will be sampled next summer. Regarding the 4th place, La Nestosa, the site is a forming mining area with open pits and tailing dams. The main pollutants are lead and zinc in high concentrations, of course. It was already identified 145 species belonging to 63 families. 10 species were selected of interest because it was analyzed the metals in shoots and soil, and 15 species were identified of conservation concern and will be included in the Bank of Germplasma of Olarizu. These are the species of interest. We have several Blackstonia perfoliata, Trifolium pratense, Nocaia caerulescens, again here. And those are found as being good for phytostabilization because some are metal excluder and others are very good for phytoextraction. Nocaia is a zinc hypercumulator, good for phytoextraction. Jazione montana, zinc accumulator, again, is good for phytoextraction. And so this analysis is being carried out. The next steps will be analyze the total metal concentrations in plant tissues of the samples collected in October 2021. And the plant species that were identified that have conservation concern are the Nocaia caerulescens, the Cytisus cantabricus, it's an endemic species, and it's good for soil stabilization and fertilization. Jazione montana, which is protected in Spain and the rest of Europe. The Molinia for soil stabilization, Festuca rubra, which has a very high soil cover rate and it's very good for soil stabilization, and Elytrocticon, it's an endemic species to Spain and France. This plant species of conservation concern will be deposited in a germplasm bank, so the seeds are cleaned, and we need 2,500 seeds per species for this work. From Lanestosa, already 53 strains were isolated, 12 strains solubilized phosphate, 36 produced siderophores, and some produced EAA. So these traits are being analyzed by NICAR in Spain. And for the assessment and conservation of microinvertebrate biodiversity, there will be samplings here in this year in spring. Thank you. This is the team members from the different institutions, the beneficiary partners, the associated partners. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you. Now, let me introduce you Mrs. Lamotte from HPC Environnement in Bordeaux, who will present you the experimentation of Phy2 management on the Jules Durando site in Angoulême, in France.
Can you see my screen? Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for let us presenting our project of Phy2 management in Angoulême in Charente. First, I will present the context and objectives of the program Phy2SUDOE in relation to our site Jules Durando in Angoulême. I will make a quick presentation of the site and summarize all the different results of the investigation already done on site, including the contamination level of the soil, in the soil and in the groundwater. Then I will expose the protocols and the technical modalities chosen for the installation of the program on site, as well as the first results obtained by a laboratory and plant test made by INRA. And finally, I will show you the schedule we are going to follow for the next months and until the end of the program, if all goes well. So, the program and context and objective. The main partner involved are the Department of Charente, is the owner of the site. And as Mr. Zveges said earlier, this is the INRA who first contacted the department for interest on the site Jules Durando, because it has contaminated soil by solvents mainly and TMEs on the surface from industrial history. The idea of Phy2 management on a former industrial site matched with an interest of the residents of the neighborhood, and the volunteer of the department to develop protocols and methods which can be used by others in the future. In this context, HPC Envirotech plays the role of technical and operational support for the program. It's an engineering office for environment in France and Europe. INRA sharing experience makes assistance into the realization of operation and work as an expert in the pen test and a lot more. Something is important to understand is that this program is not considered as a solution of pollution control on site because we have a management plan in progress for that on site, but more like a research program to develop knowledge for future application. So the presentation of the site. The site is located in a residential area of the city in Angoulême in Charente. It is approximately 1 hectare and almost entirely covered by concrete buildings or asphalt. The site has been occupied by a former battery factory between the 40s and the 80s. Since then, some appliance company or association have used the site, but not more than a few years. Since 2000, the site is not used for any activity except for pollution investigation. Currently, the site has been subject to a demolition of all buildings, but has kept the ground cover for rainwater infiltration concerns, according to the pollution source. You can see on the photo, it was the main building on the left. So, since 2011, investigation of the quality of the subsoil have been done. They consist in the realization of several diagnostics of soil with about 60 surveys to 18 meters of depth, 15 soil air sample, and about 27 piezometer on site to 10 meters of depth. For quick explanation, many investigations were realized also in the neighborhood because the pollution goes beyond the borders through the groundwater or dusting. Some of them are still in progress to determine the influence of the pollution in the neighborhood. They bring to light the soil configuration with different geological layers and the following results. All the numbers presented are the maximum level found on site. We have approximately 2 meters of fill, then limestone more or less altered on 4 to 5 meters, then a sandy silt layer with our main aquifer on site, and sandstone and marls at the end of the profile at 9 or 10 meters of depth. The main pollution on site are the VOCs, which are found at almost all geological layers, but mostly in the aquifer in the sandy silt layer. This is due to a suspected spill from an old well located on the site. In addition, the first layer of backfill is contaminated by TNEs, such as cadmium, mercury, lead, nickel, zinc, and copper. Dr. Mensch said earlier. For the part of phytomanagement, we choose to put the phytomanagement zone on the northeast of the site because this part of the site contains a lot of pollutants and mostly in the first 2 or 3 meters from the surface, the backfill. As you can see, you have the level on the right of the plan. We have TMEs, like I said, some punctual levels of hydrocarbons, some levels of VOCs and specifically TCE, PCB maximum at 1.9 milligram per kilogram, and a pH between 9 and 10. This zone is entirely covered by concrete and some asphalt in the north, and it is about 160 square meters. We say earlier 200, but it's almost the same. We are still thinking about the number exactly. For the next step, the implementation of the program is that we remove all concrete or asphalt on the area. We decompose the soil with machine and add quality compost. Then we plant species like poplar, bentgrass in the area and in some lysimeter above ground to study the relation between soil, water and plants with contaminated soil. Some lysimeter are present in the photo. As you can see, it's a big planters that allow water to be collected after it passed through the contaminated soil. So we can making samples to confirm the leachability of pollutant in that case. To know which species to plant with the degree of contamination of the soil in the seed, INRA and Dr. Mensch has performed some tests from soil samples we gave us. And the results are that the soil is being alkaline, poor in nitrogen. Also, carbonates are present in the soil in significant way. We just got the result from the laboratory past week, sorry. The result from laboratory confirmed the weak phytoavailability of the metals in the soil, which results in weak phytotoxicity in plant tests, like radish or alfalfa, the right. And 100% of the species transplanted survive like a poplar or bentgrass. In light of the observation, attention must be paid to add a quality compost with calcium nitrate before the planting phase. Maybe Dr. Mensch will be more clear on this part than me, but we are still thinking about the right composition of the compost for an efficient fit with the plant. So we have planned to schedule for the program, and in green you have the action already done with the plant test, the first plant test, the laboratory test on the soil, and the definition of the area on site. And in black you have the future steps we are going to follow. Coming soon we have the removal of the covering and earthworks site planned for the beginning of March. Then in the continuity, we'll be able to start plantation in the soil directly and in the lysimeter right next to the area. During the program, sample of soil, water and biomass will be taken for analysis and interpretation that lead to a final report at the end. And more generally, the site will host a visit for maintenance and monitoring by a Gartner company and some educational visit from School of the TC. Until the end of the program in April 2023 or 2024 if the program is extended. I don't know if Barbara or Dr. Mensch want to add something at this quick presentation that I wouldn't said, but thank you for your attention, and if you have any question you can tell us on the chat or the end, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Lamotte. We have a question. What did you do with the concrete taken out of the site?
We made a sample of the concrete before we remove all the concrete, and we can know the center. I don't know the word for décharge, but we can put all the concrete. We make sample of the concrete and we have the results, so we can put the concrete in some garbage area. I don't know the word in English for décharge in French. maybe not a mensch, you know the word?
Sorry?
You know the word for décharge in English?
It's a landfill.
Okay.
Landfill.
Okay.
So it's dumping in a landfill, in a controlled landfill.
Control landfill, yes. This may be recycled because the result of the sample are good. So I think we can recycle it in the dumpster. On peut, yes.
Yes.
Apparently, this concrete is not contaminated and you can recycle.
Yeah.
That's what you say?
Yes. With difficulty, but yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan, for your question, and thank you, Mrs. Lamotte, for your intervention. Mensch, you will present us your goal project. If you want,
you have my file, so you can load it. I cannot share my screen; it doesn't work. But you have the file.
Yes, we. Do you see?
Okay. Yeah. It's a gold project. So the gold project is a European Horizon 2020 project, and it starts in the autumn of 21. Next slide. Next slide. Yes. The gold project aims to produce, in fact, clean biofuel. And for those who are not familiar, ELUC means induced land use change impact. So it is to reduce the impact on the soil and the site. And the purpose is to grow selected high-yielding lignocellulosic crop on this contaminated land, and in the long term to return this land back to the agricultural production, and especially the production of this at the beginning of the lignocellulosic crop, and after that other crop if we have reduced the exposure to the contaminant. I don't go into detail about the contaminated land. You have a lot of information about that. But what is new, it is what we want to do, it is to produce this biofuel according to the RED II directive and the Green Deal proposal of the European Commission. This biofuel should be produced with energy crop cultivated on the abandoned land or unused or seriously degraded. The target is to obtain, it is a target of the European Commission, of course, it is to obtain 14% for biofuel, bioliquid and biomass fuel with low impact on the land, and to reach this target by 2030. And this energy crop on abandoned or contaminated land should provide feedstock for biofuel with low impact on the land use change. Next slide. We have 5 work packages into this gold project. The first one is to optimize the selected high-yielding lignocellulosic energy crop for the phyto management fit purpose and biofuel production, targeting different classes of soil pollutants, to convert the produced biomass feedstock to biofuel, and to ensure the extraction of the soil pollutant in concentrate form. It's to concentrate especially metal and metalloid, not organic, or generally the process is degrading the organics. To bridge the gap between the clean biofuel production and the optimized Phy2 management solution on contaminated land, to disseminate and communicate the project results as far as possible to boost the international collaboration, and of course to ensure the successful implementation between European Union partners in the European Union and the project partner. You will see that we have also partner in China and the States and Canada and India. Next step. So this is the scheme of the project. The first working package is to select and optimize the production of the lignocellulosic crop through pilot small-scale field experiment and large-scale experiment. The site are mainly with inorganic pollutant, but we have some site with mixed pollution where we have organic and inorganic pollutants. And the purpose is to optimize the phytomanagement option. For the second step, it is to convert, so it is a conversion process to convert, to treat and convert the biomass. We have different, let's say, strategy about this conversion and processing of the biomass harvest on the site. It is firstly the gasification, and fermentation. And after that, you have innovative pyrolysis based solution to upgrade the pyrolysis product and to obtain refinery compatible intermediates and biofuel. And the contaminant will be, as far as possible, treated in the process to concentrate them in a concentrate form. And the last work package is to optimize this value chain. I mean, the phytomanagement of the contaminated site or unused site, the production of energy crop, and the conversion route. The next slide. This is some information about, at the moment, the 4 energy crop that have been selected to match with a different site in the different country. We have 2 perennial grasses, miscanthus and switchgrass, and we have 2 annual herbaceous plants. It is sorghum and industrial hemp. We cover, you will see, we cover an area from Portugal to Poland. So, in fact, we have to adjust to the different climate. Some will be much more appropriate according to the different climate. Next slide. This is the two main purpose. The main purpose, it is to promote the biomass, and especially like in the Phy2SUDOE network, bioaugmentation. I mean, the use of beneficial microorganisms and even the mesofauna. It is one of the purpose. Oops. Something disappeared in my screen. The second point, it is to enhance as far as possible the contaminant uptake or the contaminant dissipation through the crop cultivation. In the slide, it is mentioned phyto extraction, but if you are expert, you recognize like me, like miscanthus, in fact, is mainly an excluder, switchgrass too. So small part will be removed. So we have to really improve the biomass to uptake some zinc and cadmium, for example, but lead, copper will need not removed by such plant. In the case of sorghum, we expect much more about the much more phytoavailable element like zinc, cadmium, and it is the same thing with hemp. Hemp is is a plant out of the 4 species which is accumulating the more zinc and cadmium and other metal, pH dependent, a little bit of nickel, for example. But the way it is really to stimulate the biomass, and to stimulate the biomass, One way is to use the plant growth promoting bacteria, and the other one is to use mycorrhiza, a little bit like the work presented by Elena and also Suir about the Avinière or the other site in Spain and Portugal. Another way it is to combine with biostimulant some organic product extracted from the organic matter could be biostimulant. In the Phy2SUDOE project, we are also trying to use a combination of selenium and iodium or iron EDTA to biostimulate the growth in such contaminated soil. So that's the way to try to maximize the biomass, because this will be important to harvest a sufficient amount of crop, and also to dissipate the organic contaminant when we have by stimulating the microbial community, and to try to remove through the harvest of the crop a part of the more mobile element, especially zinc, cadmium, nickel generally at this site. Next slide. This is the site of the field trio. So we have sites in Portugal, in the north of France, in Silesia, in Poland, Greece, Italy, India, China, and we were also associated with partner in Canada. Next slide, sorry. Next slide. There is, I mentioned to the audience that we have also a gold website, so you have all information in the website of the gold project. About the processing of the biomass, it is mainly done by partner in Germany, in the Netherlands. You have a first conversion route. It is combine a slow pyrolysis as a pre-treatment, or to use torrefaction or tor wash as a pre-treatment. So different strategy for the pre-treatment of the biomass. Then gasification and gas cleaning, and at the end you obtain a syngas that you can use, or you have also a fermentation, and finally you have ethanol, or for example bioethanol in the product. In the process, we want to concentrate some contaminant, and especially to collect the slide or collect the fly ash. So to collect some of the metal, especially those that are much more collecting in the bottom hash, generally like copper, or in the light fly ash like cadmium. Next slide. Okay, it's just about a slide summarizing what are the beneficial specific impact of gold. It's to create a win-win situation between the management of the contaminated area, the agricultural production, the cost reduction, and the improved phytomanagement. With the purpose to produce clean biofuel with low indirect land use change impact, using such energy crop. The purpose is to promote also an international collaboration about this topic of producing advanced biofuel on unused or idle land, and also to develop the concept of different strategy solution, and especially nature-based solution, to contribute to develop sustainable development goals in accordance with the Green Deal purpose of the European Commission. Next slide. It's just a summary of the win-win situation. explaining or summarizing the different approach. You have this combination between phytomanagement of the contaminated site, the selection of the energy crop, the phytoremediation practice, and of course the processing of the biomass. Two main conversion routes. We expect about 16 value chain to model. In fact, during the plot experiment and small plot experiment, we will test, or we are testing at the moment, 4 plant species. But for the final implementation, the 2 best plant species and combination with biostimulant or mycorrhiza or the different options for bioaugmentation, the 2 best will be selected, and this one will be used after that to produce the biomass that will be processed by the team and for the 2 conversion route. Next step. It is a view summarizing the different partner of the gold project, and you see we cover different climate in Europe about the site, different team involved in the processing of the biomass, and different experts in the advisory board, people from experts from Australia, from Brazil, from the States, from India, from China, that we can foresee a good international collaboration to improve the knowledge about this purpose of to produce such kind of biofuel. Especially, you know, the topic it is to decrease the carbon balance for plane. Next step, I think it is the next slide. It's the final one. So thank you to everybody. And if you have questions about the gold project, you see we have a website, gold h2020.au, and you can go on this site to have much more information about the whole project. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Mensch. If you have any question, you can raise the hand or try. If not, we welcome Martina Terconi from Area Science Park in Italy, who presents us the Poseidon project.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, so good afternoon and thank you for the invitation. I'm Martina Terconi from Area Science Park, which is a scientific and technological park located in Trieste, Italy. Partner and coordinator of Poseidon PCP, which is an Horizon 2020 project about polluted site decontamination technologies. And in particular, it's a PCP. It's a pre-commercial public procurement action designed to address the lack of innovation-driven public demand in the soil decontamination sector in Europe, taking into account that member states are making effort to establish national decontamination and remediation strategy, which are generally very costly, and estimated that in Europe there are more than 2.5 million contaminated sites, most of them in need of remediation measures. This common need is also in Poseidon PCP, where 5 European procurers are all facing a common soil decontamination challenge in their site, and all are leveraging public demand to identify fit for purpose and cost-effective, innovative, and sustainable soil decontamination solution. In particular, we have two frontrunners that are part of Trieste and Bilbao City Council, which are the owners of the public site where this technology will be tested, and other observers in Spain, Belgium, and Portugal that are interested in this developing technology to possibly use them in their future decontamination action. For example, Vitoria-Gasteiz City Council participate in the project with the CEA, Centro de Estudios Ambientales, that in the next speech will present their particular polluted site study. Moreover, we are looking also for other procurers interested to enlarge our buyers group network, but I will detail this point later on. We started defining a common conceptual model, a common virtual brownfield that integrates all the site's characteristics, harmonized and assessed from a hydrological point of view. And
Sorry, Mrs. Tarconi, do you want we share your presentation? Because we didn't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you want, we can share your presentation. I received.
Oh, I have, I have updated it. Let me. I'm sorry. Do you see it now?
Yes, it's okay.
Oh, I'm really sorry.
No problem.
Sorry. So we defined our common challenge, that is identify a new soil remediation life cycle that is sustainable, cost-effective technology, preferred as an in situ and potentially on site, to be capable of decontaminating heterogeneous anthropic soils in brownfield, composed by a mixture of industrial waste and soil consisting of clays and sands, highly polluted by petroleum hydrocarbon, TPHs and PAHs, and heavy metals, in particular arsenic and lead. To close the gap between the supply side and demand side for innovation in this sector, we use the instrument of the pre-commercial procurement as an effective bridge between applied research and market demand. The pre-commercial procurement is a competitive multiple sourcing procedure for procuring R&D services, so applied research and technological development services. I like to use.
Sorry, Mrs. Tarconi, sorry. Can you take your presentation on diaporama format?
Sorry?
Because we see just a part of your presentation, not the slide.
I'm sorry.
Entire slide, yes.
So if I use this visualization, can you see it?
No. Perhaps if you take on diaporama, if you want, we can share your presentation.
Non, mais Barbara, elle a updaté, elle a fait une présentation qui est différente. Mais Martina, it was working very well,
yes.
but just move to the diaporama mode. Well, at the right part of your screen, you have a small. You see, you have the diaporama. Yes, it's okay. Perfect.
Okay. I'm really sorry. Okay.
No, it's okay.
So we were speaking about the pre-commercial procurement with the objective to steer the development of novel solutions for brownfield decontamination toward the actual needs of the public sector expressed by our procurers' needs, and to compare and validate alternative solution approaches from various vendors. In particular, the scope of the PCP is to develop only R&D services before commercialization, in 3 different phases. There are the solution exploration and design, the prototyping and lab tests, and the final one, which is the field testing, to demonstrate that the product or the service is suitable for production. From a legal point of view, the PCP is a competitive procurement designed to exclude state aid, in which 51% of the contract value is for R&D services, and where the public purchaser doesn't reserve the R&D result exclusively for its own use, while IPR ownership rights are assigned to companies participating in the PCP in a way that doesn't give the company any form of unfair advantage. As Poseidon, as I said, is a competitive multiple sourcing procedures, suppliers are invited to compete in parallel in different phases of the research development. As said, we have the phase 1 for design solution, phase 2 for prototype development, and phase 3 for the field testing. In PCP, in the Poseidon PCP, we have contracted, for example, out of 13 offers, 6 contractors for phase 1, out of which 4 for phase 2, and out of which 2 for phase 3. In particular, we have launched our call for tender in January 2019. You can find all the public documents in our website, which is poseidonproject.eu, and where you can find many other technical insight about the technological solution that our contractors are developing. For example, for phase 1, you can find the abstract of all the technology developed as in the phase of solution design. But most interesting, for the phase 2, we have all the videos about the prototype and laboratory scale that have been developed and tested. For example, I will show you some part of this video, hoping that it works. But if you go in the site and click on the full video, you can also see not only the technical parts developed, but also the complete presentation of the contractor consortium, their experience in the PCP so far, their IPR management, and their technical and commercial ambitions linked to their solution. One of the technology tested in phase 2 is the Remix technology developed by a Slovenian consortium, which is a 2-phase in-site and in-situ on-site technology, a soil washing plus a biological treatment with some phytoremediation techniques, which doesn't require existing infrastructure and can be implemented directly on brownfield site, designed to remove lead and arsenic and many other toxic metals, and recalcitrant organic pollutant, capable of treating the soil while presenting the natural living substrate, the function of the soil, and the ecosystem. Let me try to show you the video. Oh, okay. Can you still see it?
Remix is a sustainable remediation technology designed to efficiently remove toxic metabolites, metals, and organic soil, and at the same time, preserve soil as a natural substrate. Remix is designed in 2 stages. Chemical soil washing in stage 1, while the biological stage 2 aids stage 1 by using green technologies, bioremediation, phytomanagement, and natural. One of the innovative features of Remix stage 1 is the removal of metallic arsenic and lead and other metals, soil and process solutions, and recycling of solutions and reagent. No wastewater is generated. When reagent is recycled, form which is connected, requires extremely long soil extraction time. The Remix process is designed to activate the main as extraction. The application of zero-valent iron by slurry. Curb secondary emission toxic elements from the remix. Use surfactants, remove and absorbents to immobilize organic pollutants. Accumulate in surfactant crystals, which are innovatively removed from soil and process solution simultaneously with toxic elements. Drainage stage 2, the soil is treated to a level where no potentially harmful residues. Stage 1 remains. Soil is nurtured to reach the potential of quality.
Okay. The second technology is the RIBAS solution from a Catalan consortium, which is a reactive infiltration basin for in-situ soil treatment. It's an intermediate soil washing with saturated or partially saturated infiltration of an innovative reactive solution that degrades organic compounds and mobilizes metals to be captured downstream by precipitation.
The main feature developed by Eureka and Amphos is that it allows remediating a contaminated soil with metals and or petroleum hydrocarbons, avoiding its excavation. Thus, it is an in-situ implementation approach. But our solution can deal with a variety of sites, since it can be adapted to the specific contaminants by changing the applied regions. Actually, the novelty of this solution is a combination of 3 different technological approaches, which are usually implemented standalone in the field of soil or groundwater remediation or in mining activity.
Okay, the third one instead has been developed by an international consortium captained by HPC Italy, and it's about arrays technologies, that is electrode-aided soil remediation. It's a flexible in-situ modular platform with installation of electrodes for addressing various organic and inorganic pollutants and co-contamination through the transport induced by the electric field in the soil, while stimulating chemical and biochemical treatment action by injection of chemical and nutrients.
The proposed solution is an electrode-based remediation approach, integrate physical, chemical, and biological mechanisms, clean up of contamination. The innovative aspect of this proposed technology is integration of these 3 remediation processes, enhance the remediation that could be obtained anyway by each of them, the mine refill. The challenge is the implementation of a dynamic remediation approach, addressing various organic and inorganic pollutants simultaneously.
Okay, and the last but not least is the soilomic process developed by the international consortium captained by Teseco Bonifiche. It's an innovative protocol that uses combined biological and chemical-physical processes based on the integration of metagenomics and environmental engineering, and aim at decontaminating soil and groundwater from organic and inorganic pollutant. The soilomic procedure is applied in situ through an operating technology called bioflashing, which is an original technological system that purifies contaminated groundwater and establishes a circulation of specific biological and chemical physical solution in the subsoil, aimed to the degradation of organic contaminant and the removal of the inorganic ones.
So what we propose project is a technology for remediation of soil and also contaminated groundwater, with the idea of exploiting microorganisms for the degradation of contaminants, together with the flashing of the technology that we proposed based some tools relying on the microbiological characterization, and in particular this microbiome, and the isolation of consortia that are of demolishing simulation made of petroleum carbons have opened in terms of understanding what's underneath, but in terms of microbiome, microorganisms. We have called this protocol biologic in-situ sciences for the design and the control of degradation and processes. We have called technology flushing, mobile and generatable plants with a low impact, environmental and bioflashing without chemical and biological action, which is capable of degrading hydrocarbons in a short and at the same time extracting metal, alloys, and other. And this also works. Action is expressed.
Okay, so moving to the presentation. We have seen all these technologies. Now we are in the phase 3 of our PCP, a solution proposed by HPC and TESECO consortia have been selected as awardees in phase 3. So now they are starting their field testing activities. And while our contractors are developing their technology, the Poseidon Partnership is still working for inclusion of potential public authorities as procurers, stimulating the public demand aggregation processes in order to prepare for a future cross-joint border PPI, a public procurement for innovation, which is the real implementation of the decontamination solution. A call for interest is still open in our website. So if you are a site owner, or if your researcher may be in contact with public and private procurers that may be interested in this kind of technologies, please go to our call for interest call or contact us, so we will keep you informed and posted about the technological development that we are following in Poseidon PC. And if you don't have any other question, thank you all, and I finished.
Thank you, Mrs. Stephanie. I don't see a question, but perhaps we come. If not, the next presentation it's by Juan Vilela Lozano from Sierra Green Lab in Victoria Gasteiz. Who presents the study case of graveras de la sarta polyptic.
Yes.
Sorry.
Can you see me?
We don't see it, but we hear you.
Okay. I'm sharing the screen now. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see the presentation. Okay. Not
so I'll go on.
Not yet. We have lost your presentation.
Okay, so you see the presentation. I'll start then. Okay, my name is Juan Vilela. I work in the Center for Environmental Studies. It's a
sorry, Juan. Sorry, we can't see your presentation.
You cannot see?
Yes, okay. We cannot see.
Okay. Do you want to share it? You have it?
Yes, we share. No problem.
Okay.
It's okay. You see?
I do, yes. And you
Yes.
you do see me because I don't see myself. I hope you can listen to me.
Thank you.
Okay, I was presenting myself. I work in the Center for Environmental Studies. It's an organism of the city of Vitoria-Gasteiz. It's a city in the north of Spain, 250,000 inhabitants. And the city is quite famous for its green policies. Part of our work is to bring new environmental strategies to the city, such as these ones that we are looking at now about soil remediation. So the CIA is participating both in the Phy2SUDOE project, and also we are followers of the Poseidon. So today I'm gonna show really quick a polluted site of the city that is very interesting for us because we have the need to recover that land, and we will probably need to use either phytoremediation or either one of these in situ green solutions for recovering the soil. The next slide, please. So this is an aerial picture of the city. It's a quite compact city, and if you see surrounding the city, there is a system of parks, peripheral parks. It's called the green belt. It's been developing since the 80s, and it's almost complete. We don't almost close it because there is a piece that is missing in the south. You see, it's called Graveras de la Sarte. And it is missing for two reasons. One is because it is polluted, it's a polluted site. And secondly, because it's privately owned. It belongs to private property. So the effort of the city here is first learn how we can clean the soil, and secondly try to buy or make an agreement with the owners so we can finish the green belt here. Next slide, please. These are some pictures from the year 2000, 1999. The area is polluted because it was a gravel pit. The rock is limestone and there were a lot of gravels. So in the past, it was excavated to take out the gravels for construction. And in the holes that were left on the site, there was a lot of land filling. So what you see there is the land filling. So it's, let's say, 2, 3, or even 4 or 5 meters deep of landfill with construction and demolition waste. In the beginning, it was concrete, stones, and earth. But later on, because it was an abandoned space, many other industrial wastes and pills were thrown over the surface. So we have now a lot of pollution in the surface. Next slide, please. This is a map that shows in red color the area that is polluted. Basically, we're talking about 30 hectares, 30 hectares. The idea from the Center of Environmental Studies in that time was to use the holes that were left to take out all the landfill and give room for the water to fill it, because we have streams coming from the south of the city. There are mountains in the south that will go through this area. So as retention ponds, to avoid flooding in the city, we could use the space for water. Next slide, please. You see more or less here a hydrological plan that shows that we have like 7 or 8 streams coming out of the mountains in the south, running into the city. The problem is that these rivers get into the sewage system and it collides. So we have a lot of flooding in the winter. In the summer, the streams are dry, but in the winter, they take a lot of rain. So we have flooding problems. The idea of this hydrological plan was to have retention ponds in different places. And one of these is on the polluted site. Next slide, please. This is the more advanced project that we have. It's from 2003, and the idea was to use from these 30 hectares, more or less half of it with 2 retention ponds. What they call one, the one to the east, the eastern pond, and the western pond. And from there, the water would go through a pipe, an underground pipe, to another river that is downstream, sorry, and this river doesn't get into the sewage system. It's an open river, and it just would be clean water taken to the river instead of clean water put into the water treatment system. Next slide, please. In order to develop this project, the city had to make a pollution study because as a polluted site, it is mandatory that you do an investigation and see how it is. So on the left bottom right, you see that the eastern pond or the eastern hole is more or less clean. The green dots mean that the soil analyses were clean. While in the western pond or in the western hole, the areas in red is the map of the industrial residues, and there are a lot of points in red, meaning that pollution was above the limit levels. So basically all those residues have to be taken out of the site. Next slide, please. This, well, it's too small to see, but I will explain. These are more or less the calculations of the type of pollutants, that basically is a mix of metals and hydrocarbons, and also the number of tons or cubic meters of soil that needed to be moved. Basically, we have to take out 300,000 cubic meters of soil. For this reason, the project didn't go on, and it stopped because it is too expensive to take out the soil to another place to be cleaned. So it didn't go on project, and what we are now is looking at different options, on-site options or in-situ options to clean soil. Next slide. So we also are looking at the water of the place because this site is located in an aquifer, and also we have a landfill, the municipal landfill upstream. So we are looking at a layer of water that is maybe 2 meters depth that so far seems to be clean, but there is another stream really down through the limestones with some pollution. So we have a lot of piezometers to monitor the quality of the water underground. Next slide. Also, we have an area that has been not investigated, and this is the first step we are taking this year, is to investigate the north area, which is mainly 15 hectares of soil that has not been investigated, but we know from the past that it is probably as polluted as the others. Next slide. So far, what we have done is an approach with the help of some partners, which are NACER, is the Agronomic Institute of the Basque Country, and the University of the Basque Country, to look at how the soil that is already in place could be treated. So for 2 years, what we have been doing, some experimental essays in the lab, but with the soil from the site. We took the soil from a location that is representative of the pollution of the site, and in the university labs we were applying different treatments, 2 kinds of organic amendments and 4 treatments for the plants. Sorry about the noise. Next slide, please. After this essay, we know that there is a good combination of the sludge organic amendment and the use of alfalfa as the plant that has been quite successful in the cleaning of the soil. So we're thinking about the next step, that would be making an experiment on site, just instead of in the lab, on site. So we're waiting now for the owners to give us permission to enter the land and try these phytoremediation techniques there. But we know that this is a very, very complex site, and we expect that also the solutions that Poseidon will bring may be applicable in our site, and since we are followers of the project, we will have access to those solutions. Next slide. Just to finish, a couple of slides. This one is an image that was published in the newspapers, in the local newspapers, because the mayor of the city already has declared that there's going to be a park. So this is also part of the political agenda now. So far, this is just an idea, but we know that we have to move forward in order to make that a reality. So I think there is one more slide, but it's just an aerial picture of the project that is going to happen soon, which is the remediation pond, the retention pond on the western side, which was not so much polluted, and this project is going on now. Thank you for listening, and any question I can take now or later. That slide just shows the eastern retention pond that was not so polluted and will be under construction this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you, Mrs. Kanjid, sorry for the name, Kajid Elmer, to have accepted to share with us her experience on the Syracuse site in United States. Do you want we share your presentation, or it's okay? It's okay. We see it.
You can see it? Oh, great. Fantastic.
Yes.
Let's see if I can put it in presentation mode, and then we're ready for action. Let's see. All right, can you see this in presentation mode?
Yes, we see and we hear you. Thank you.
Excellent, great. Okay, thank you, everybody. Today I'm here to talk to you about adaptive design and management practices for habitat restoration plantations and invasive. Generally speaking, I'm going to start off by talking about the adaptive approach to management and what does that mean, how to integrate your site's context into your design process. And also I'm going to provide a series of examples and experiences in habitat design and management of restoration sites based on my experience during the last 10 years in upstate New York in the US, so a little bit farther from my colleague presenters today. I've been working for a multinational conglomerate that performs contaminated site and soil remediation, and also the associated site restoration and habitat restoration, which I was a part of the team for the northeast area in upstate New York. So to start off, what is the adaptive approach? We live in a world of change. We have a changing climate, changing environments, changing ecologies, and a lot of this is so beyond our control. One citation that I love when talking about adaptive management has to do with the idea that it's grounded in the admission that humans do not know enough to manage ecosystems. There is just too much going on and too many changing factors to be able to control them to the umpteenth degree. So the idea is for this adaptive approach to management and design, for it to be an iterative process where we learn along the way and we adapt as changes arise. And that gives us a greater flexibility in the solutions that we provide when approaching habitat design and restoration plantations. So starting off, when you're talking about the planning stage, you're going to be looking at your goals and objectives as you would on at any site. No matter the different directions that the project may take, these goals and objectives will always be the anchor to all decision making. So they grab a greater importance when looking at this iterative approach. And secondly, you talk about performance indicators. These are going to be tangible, measurable, and quantifiable data that will verify that the performance of the system is actually meeting the goals and objectives that we have set out when starting out a restoration project. So they are absolutely key to be able to determine if we are achieving what we want to achieve. After that, you go through your design, your typical design, development of logistics, specifications, and so on. But before starting implementation, you're going to look at establishing a monitoring program for the selected performance indicators. So you want to develop a program where you can monitor and document those performance indicators, which are going to help you verify that you're meeting your goals. After that, you implement your strategies and actions, and then you start your period where you're performing your monitoring and evaluation of the site. You're performing your performance verification, you're determining that you're meeting your goals and objectives, that your performance indicators are being met. These can be, for example, if your goal and objective is to limit invasive species, then a performance indicator may be the percent cover of invasive species. And so your performance verification will be that as long as I am below a 5% of invasive species, for example, then I've met my performance verification goals. And so that would be part of your monitoring program. And then, of course, you report those findings and you adjust and adapt to what you learn through that monitoring period. Typically, that might take you back to your implementation and you might have to redo some of your work. It might take you all the way back to your planning stage and you'll have to rethink part of your design and start from there. So it really takes you all the way around the circle, and this will happen iteratively. You will plan, do, check, and act, and then repeat until you meet your goals. And of course, this will always happen, always managing your stakeholder expectations. You're going to be talking with your regulators, you're going to be talking with clients, if there are third-party oversight actors, you're going to want to talk with them, community stakeholders, manage their expectations so that they understand what the approach is and how you're adapting to it actively through the process of the project. I also wanted to touch briefly on context-sensitive solutions and how they apply to habitat restoration. Context-sensitive solutions is an approach to advancing projects collaboratively. The idea was born in transportation planning in the 90s and revolves around the idea that every site should fit within its physical settings and limitations. It accounts for the resources that are available to it, and you need to take into account the surrounding context. All site design and planning begins with engaging with your stakeholders and creating a shared vision and mission, which will mark the basis for decision making and drive your goals and objectives. Continued communication keeps a flowing consensus between all parties and will all in all help you transmit where you're trying to direct your site. So an example, this is an example I'm going to talk about through my presentation. This is a impacted wetland in upstate New York. Back in the day, it used to lie on a contaminated site, which was remediated. It had a high impact of Phragmites australis, which in upstate New York is a highly invasive species with a low habitat value. And so this communication with stakeholders and collaboration with all parties helps reach a consensus and a vision of where you're trying to direct that site. And you can see the end result in the bottom image. I'll talk about the site through the presentation. It's also important to have a deep understanding of the context of your site. What are your main ecological connectors? Strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities that are presented at the site. And also, are there any out-of-scope implications that might impact your design or your implementation? So going back to the same example, looking at the further context, we see that it's a site associated to one of the main tributaries to a lake. And this lake actually forms part of a greater lake lacustrine system called the Great Lakes in upstate New York. So there's a much wider ecological context which impacts directly your decision-making when establishing your goals and objectives to perform your habitat design and restoration at a site like this. And then finally, it's important to be open, to be flexible and creative when developing these effective solutions and planting plans. To be specific to each site, it's important to apply standards and practices. We work with them every day, but we need to many times interpret them specifically to the site and see how they fit in to the context that we're working with. We've talked a lot today about different pilot studies and investigation projects. These have such an invaluable are an invaluable component to being able to develop these designs. Being able to perform a pilot study at your site, try different concepts of your design and see how you can adapt your design or change your design thinking based on the results from your pilot study will really take you a long way. And so along those lines, talking about being flexible and creative with the site, this site in particular had a whole array of different installations that ultimately led to its success. And I'm going to talk a little bit about its different components and how they all came together. So when talking about habitat design, we're looking at the same site from a different angle. One approach to think about is creating a complex mosaic system. This site was encroached by stressors from all sides, and so the focus was to create a mosaic of conditions with complex hydrology. You can see here at the center of the site that there is a berm. Oops. Trying to get a laser pointer here. There is a berm in the center of the site which divides hydraulically the site into two areas. On this side, there were different ponds at different depths. And on the other side, there was a highly channelized stream, which was then transformed into a sinuous channel, which you can see here, which ultimately improved the habitat quality of the site by lengthening that riparian edge and riparian condition and slowing down the water velocities in the area. On top of that, it created the opportunity to create connected wetlands. You can see different connecting points, and so the water levels within these wetlands would fluctuate with the water levels of the sinuous channel, creating an even greater diversity of conditions. And then finally, there were other wetlands in between these spaces and these curves, which were at a higher elevation. They were perched wetlands that received precipitation water. So again, creating a mosaic of conditions with different hydrology, thinking about the greater complexity of different conditions, then the greater the variety of vegetation, plants and species that will be able to establish at this wetland and therefore offer a higher habitat value. In the next slide, you can see a section, a conceptual section of the site showcasing that idea of the different elevations and different connections to the sinuous channel, which is this little area here, which you can see in the center, the top center, and a couple of photos of the site at the bottom. They created the opportunity to establish emergent vegetation, scrub, wetlands vegetation, upland, forested areas, and riparian edge vegetation as well. So a highly complex site. This is a photo from during construction. To the right, you can see the original channelized channel, which was blocked off and diverted along the site, on this left side here, which you can see. Interestingly, the diversion channel was left in place after the finalization of the installation. Instead of filling it in, they left the diversion channel, and that offered a physical barrier to block invasive species from encroaching from this side of the site into the site. Again, working with the physical advantages of your site to be able to meet your goals is a good example here. The site was planted with over 50,000 plants, but another thing to take into consideration is that further plantings, enhancement plantings, were conducted throughout the monitoring period after that. Initially, around 120 species were installed, and yet over 200 species were identified by the end of the monitoring period, suggesting that volunteer vegetation and species were establishing at the site, which was great news. And also the selection of genuses had a predominance on species preferred by pollinators, again, enhancing that habitat value. And habitat structures and perches for birds were also included. And this is the site, how it looked at the end of the 5-year period for monitoring. That's your diversion channel and your sinuous channel to the right. And you can just see the mosaic condition of different patches of vegetation site. These are some photos of the habitat structures also installed. Different heights of perches allowed for refuge for waterfowl and reptiles, basking logs, lower basking logs, and also lower piles were interesting shelter for muskrats and for mink. So another approach, a different approach to adaptive thinking when designing for habitat is thinking about habitat modules, thinking about the consolidation of representative species and their corresponding habitat requirements into modules that can then be applied to different areas of a site that meet certain physical characteristics and conditions. So an example here is for another site of a lacustrine shoreline, where we identified a series of different modules. Each module had its own specific planting list based on the physical characteristics of that module, and it was then aligned with the physical characteristics of the site based on water depth, substrate type, and wave energy. A pilot study was performed also to see how these plantings would establish, if they would be successful or not. And so here in this planting plan, you can see the different modules, the different shades show different modules, and just the complexity based on the elevations along the shoreline. But based on the results from the pilot study and the incidence of wave action, you can see that the team decided to install some protective berms to limit the wave action that was coming from the north and protect that shoreline for plantings. So this is what the site looked like straight at the beginning of the installation, with protective edge and erosion control products. It was heavily seeded with also specific native plant seed pallets. You can see the varying elevations throughout the different sites. And then you can see how the vegetation established over time through that first year of installation. Some irrigation was needed as well. It was quite a dry year. We created some enclosures around some of the vegetation to protect it from the incidence of carp and pests. And in this photo, you can see the different strata of types of vegetation based on the elevations throughout the shoreline. This is from the shore looking straight out into the lake, and the protective berm in the background. And this is what the site looked like within the first couple of years of installation. So a rich wetland shoreline that was developed throughout that lacustrine edge. And those berms also ended up having vegetation established on them. And you can see how that vegetation spread from the initial planting enclosures. So after this, you wanted to look at adaptive management practices as well. Once you've performed your design, you've installed it, you need to then focus on your maintenance and monitoring program. There are an array of activities that you need to perform to make sure at all times that you're meeting your goals and objectives. You'll adapt to field changes and amend perhaps issues with erosion. Monitor your vegetation cover progression. Create your quantitative documentation of your site performance indicators that we talked about at the beginning. Enhance the site where possible. If you're seeing that certain vegetation is not establishing in one area, then enhance it with additional plantings or perhaps other species. An example in the top right corner, you can see an example where we installed coir logs with herbaceous plantules in areas where they were slightly deeper than expected, and so we wanted to enhance that vegetation establishment as well. And then another management consideration are pests. In the northeast of the US, deer are a huge pest in browsing, so we had to protect vegetation, especially in the winter. Canada geese would browse and graze the plantules, so we had to bring in border collies to protect those edges from the geese. Beaver, we did not design for beaver, and yet they came to the site, and so after installation we had to revisit how to protect the trees that had been installed, and we put in some protective casings. And also treating for carp, which are also an issue. They spawn in shallow areas of the emergent plantings and cause many damages. And so you can see in this photo, for example, that we had to install fences along the edges of the plantations to protect them from carp. And you can see the drastic difference between the vegetation within the enclosures versus outside of them. Granted, we also concentrated our plantings in the protected areas. And so I also wanted to touch briefly on invasive species mitigation. We've talked about it briefly through the presentation, but it's important to touch on that early detection and rapid response are key factors when working with invasive species. To be able to set realistic objectives, it may not be feasible to eradicate every single stem of invasive species present at your site, but if you're able to reach a feasible goal that meets the standards that you need to implement at your site, then looking at different methods that you can apply to meet those realistic objectives would be more cost effective than trying to eradicate every single stem present at the site. Again, monitoring thoroughly the sites for the presence of invasives instead of reacting to their presence can go a long way as well. Also to consider applying a combination of approaches at a site. Specific to your site size, it's not the same if you have a small plot versus 16 acres of wetlands to work with. And also the level of infestation. Do you have a few isolated stems that could be hand treated or hand pulled, or are you looking at a large infested field that needs intensive invasive species treatment? So to consider different methodologies of treatment of invasives and to combine different approaches can go a long way, and to consider applying them during multiple seasons as well to have a greater effect on the impacts of your treatment against invasive species. And to also always pair that with intensive native species planting and seeding. I found that the best way to fight against invasive species in the long term is to outcompete it with a native plant community. So treating and then replacing it with the vegetation that could establish in its place. And finally, also to consider the fine-tuning with precision work of your habitat treatment. Going into a site, if you're meeting your goals and objectives and you only have a few small areas of treatment needed than to limit your exposure and use of chemicals and just perform hand pulling or very specific precision work to be able to eliminate those last remnants of invasive species. So summing up, to consider when looking at adaptive design approaches to habitat restoration, think about creating a habitat mosaic of conditions. Consider grouping your different planting lists to habitat modules to really specifically address different site conditions that you're working with, and to always remember to plan for enhancements throughout your monitoring and maintenance period, and to consider pilot testing if and where feasible, or to take the experiences of others when possible. In your management practices, plan for the unknown and account for contingencies, because things will come up that you weren't expecting. Set up a rigorous monitoring plan so that you have a very clear idea of how your site is progressing over time, and observe changes and work with them along the way. Finally, for invasive species mitigation, use physical barriers to your advantage, use your sites to your advantage when fighting against invasives, combine different methods, treat seasonally, and prevention is always preferable than a cure. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. I would love to answer any questions if you have any, and I would like to provide a special thanks to the Phy2 team for this opportunity and to the fellow presenters.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kejid. I don't see any question. Sorry.
I would like to ask a question.
Yes,
Natalia?
yes.
This is Juan Vilela.
Yes.
Based on your experience, Natalia, you already explained, no, you've been working in the New York State. How flexible are the regulators for this kind of projects? I'm thinking, I really like your presentation. I really enjoyed the details about the habitat restoration next to the river. So I was thinking, in the Basque Country, there is, the water regulators that is quite strict in terms of what you can do and what you cannot do. So the question on one side would be, how are the regulations there? Is it too strict or not? And what difference do you see now that you work here in the Basque Country, in this area? Thank you.
Yes, that's a very, very good question, Juan. Thank you. So in terms of the regulators, I cannot stress enough the importance of working with your regulators to meet the goals needed at your sites. In the case of the sites that I was talking about, these were Superfund sites, so they were contaminated sites that were under a consent order by EPA and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. The site owners were required by law to perform the remediation and restoration of these sites. However, a close collaboration between the technical teams that I formed a part of and the regulators really led to the successful implementation of the project, and also to adapt to the changes throughout the monitoring period in order to meet the goals. There were hiccups and issues that came up along the way. Working with those regulators and establishing a relationship of trust where they saw that we were always on top of going above and beyond the requirements in order to meet the goals that they had established really helped us a working relationship which allowed us to progress these sites. I understand that this is not always feasible. This, of course, is a project that has been decades in the making. I've given a small piece of a much larger program, and so, of course, this happened at multiple levels. I would answer in the case of here in the Basque Country, are applicable also in other areas in the southeast of Europe. I would also I would recommend to work with the regulators or the regulatory party. I have found projects where, you know, we've tossed around ideas and there have been issues. Oh, well, we're not allowed to do this. We're not allowed to do that. But a lot of the times, if you're able to contact some of the responsible parties that can explain where you have flexibility and where there is opportunity to explore, not explore, that can go a long way into applying some creative thinking and looking at other approaches and other ways to apply the restoration practices that you want to apply. And finally, I think it is worth mentioning that in terms of permitting requirements, to be able to interpret the intent of a permit of a requirement. So if a regulator says you cannot do this because of this, to interpret what the intent is behind that requirement and see how that applies to your site. And if there are differences, site-specific differences, then to, again, try to work with the regulator to see if there is some wiggle room there and some flexibility to work around.
Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you, Juan.
Well explained.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you. I would like to thank you for your scientific experience on depolluting sites. I propose you to close this event, this workshop. Thank you a lot for your participation, and we hope to see you on the next workshop on September, probably in September in Galice, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you to all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.